This is chapter 37. I didn't finish last week's lesson.
And actually, you've been studying the Bible how long? And I bet, well, I'm not a betting person, but I'd say you've read the Bible through many times, with just going from here and there.
One time.
One time.
And that was when I first was studying the Bible. I had no idea what it said. I picked it up and I read it like a novel.
Mm-hmm. You did?
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Because I wanted to know what the story was. I mean, I was a novel reader, so, I mean, I read novels. Not that I was a novel reader, but
reading Stephen King. And
reading
such
Stephen
like.
King and Peter Benchley and, you know, crazy stuff like that. So I had not been in the Bible since I was 16 years old, and then not much, because I went to the Church of Christ, and the youth group didn't teach the Bible. What they taught was what was wrong with all the other churches.
Right.
So we had a quarterly or a study guide that we went by, and every Sunday we sat down and we learned what was wrong with this church and that church and that church and that church, and that's what I mean, it was basic, you know, comparative theology. We didn't study the Bible. So when I was 16 years old, I said, I had enough of this. If that's church, and I saw it within the church there, because you know, not just that particular congregation, it happens all the time, we see it in the news. But I could see that man was with that woman, but he wasn't married to that woman. So I told my dad when I was 16, I said, if that's religion, I don't want it. So I didn't have anything else to do with the church until I married Leslie. And then I was reluctant. I said, organized religion has nothing for me. I don't care anything about it. I love God. I mean, what little bit I knew about God, I respected him. But I didn't have any interest in church. But I decided that I would read the Bible. I could not read the King James because I had my mind in Stephen King. You know? So the King James version is a little weird, you know. Mm-hmm. So I bought an NIV because it was easy read, and back then you didn't have 9 gazillion translations of the Bible. Mm-hmm. NIV was the other option besides the Revised Standard Version, which read just about as hard as the King James. Mm-hmm. So I bought an NIV because it was easy to read. And I sat down and I read it just like I would read any other novel from page 1 to the end of the chapter, to the end of the book. I said, okay, Noah, the flood, you know, I got all those stories down. And I still was reluctant to begin to study until I met Alex Naiman. Amen. And Alex Naiman woke me up to the scriptures. He was very patient, very kind. All the questions I had, he would sit down with me and answer. He would spend hours with me studying the Bible, answering my questions more than just studying the Bible, because I would say, I read this, but that doesn't make any sense. Can you help me? Oh, of course you can help me.
Yeah, boy.
So anyway, yeah, so that was the one and only time I ever read the Bible straight through.
Straight through.
Only time. So these people that say, I read the Bible through every year, but then I study with them or I ask them questions, and they say, I never read
What
that.
What do they get out of it?
I never read that. Where is that? And well, it's right here, you know.
I should just starting now.
So, you know, saying that you sit down and read your Bible straight through every year, if you don't know what you're reading, and you read it like a novel like I did, what are you getting out of it?
Nothing.
You can say, I've read my Bible through 5 times or 10 times or whatever. So what? So what? So we study so we know what's in the Bible. That's why it takes us 2 years to get through the book of Acts. Okay? You know, I don't tell them how long it's going to take us to get through Genesis on our Wednesday night study.
Well, we're all the way up to chapter 9. That's pretty good.
You think so?
Yeah, we've only got 3 more years.
Okay, so open your Bibles to Genesis chapter 37.
37.
And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Was he a bad kid? Spoiled rotten. Now Israel loved Joseph more than his children, all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Is he a spoiled rotten kid? He is the only son of the woman that Jacob really loved. He didn't love Leah. He didn't love the two concubines.
Leah, yeah.
No, he didn't love Leah. He didn't love the other two concubines.
Mm-hmm.
So the sons that were born to him through them were like, okay.
Their sons.
Possession.
Well,
Stepkids.
they were, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
But he loved Joseph's mother. He wanted Joseph's mother from the moment he saw her at the well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So he was many years in coming. He had had all these other sons before he got Joseph. And when he finally gets Joseph from the woman that he loves, he is the special child.
He could see her in him.
Do what?
He could see resemblances of her in him also.
Possible.
Possibly. But, I mean, more importantly, this is the child of this is the only child I ever wanted. It's from the woman that I ever wanted. You know, that makes him special.
Even though she does have another child later,
You know, it's much later.
but it doesn't really mention it
No,
until.
not here. So, Israel loved Joseph more than all his brethren because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Now, this coat of many colors is a coat with long sleeves. It's not necessarily that it has multiple colors, like Jerry's shirt there.
Well, it says, I have a footnote that says many pieces. So I'm wondering if this is like a patchwork quilt or something.
Actually, it's speaking specifically of the long sleeves.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the long sleeves, if you had a long sleeve jacket on, you were royalty. It was an indication of royalty. So it indicated to the other brothers that, hey, this guy
It's special.
is special.
Mm-hmm.
Our father loves him more than he, I mean, it just made it evident that the father loved him more than anybody else.
Dad just put him over us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then along comes the dream. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all the other brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. So this causes great conflict in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him even more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream that I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. What does this mean, obeisance?
Bowing down.
Bowing down.
Okay.
So you know what the sheaves are when they're bound up. You've probably seen pictures of them if you haven't seen something like that in the field. So Joseph stands tall, and all the other 12 or 11,
Bow
or
down.
10 at this time, bow down to him,
Gave honor, yes.
gave honor to him.
Mm-hmm.
So he's 17 years old, and these older brothers, some of them are by now
In their 30s or
40,
40s.
you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, so they're saying, wait a minute, you know, who do you think you are? You're the kid in the family. Who do you think you are?
So was this kind of a wrong that Jacob did by telling his brothers about this dream? Not necessarily wrong.
Joseph.
Or Joseph, you know, touting about this dream kind of at the wrong time. These guys were already, you know.
Was there going to be a right time?
Well, who knows? I mean, would have been better to wait.
Didn't the father see the angst between the children?
I'm sure, yeah.
Absolutely. He had to have seen the animosity between them, yeah.
Most parents would kind of,
I wish it were different, but what
So-
can I do? Yeah.
So was this spoiled brat bragging, or was he just innocently telling this tale?
I think he would innocently tell it, because I don't really realize that he understood how angry they were with him.
Just because he's such a sweet-natured person that he doesn't see stuff in other people?
Right.
Either that, or there's going to be a little bit of that, but I think too, the Holy Spirit had something to do with this too. Bringing, you know, because he got this dream from God, and the Holy Spirit, you know, said, "Hey, you need to tell." what's going on.
Urged him to tell
Urged
us
him to tell.
something.
Yeah, there could be something to that.
I mean, I'm just.
I kind of lean more toward the fact that he was an innocent, honest, loving child.
17-year-old kid.
Yeah, immature. Yeah, he lived with his brothers, but you know, what does a 17-year-old kid know about being 50
Or 40 or
or
whatever.
40 or whatever? You know, being a full-grown adult. Nothing. You know, you think, oh man, I'm never going to live till I'm 30.
That's right.
I mean, you know, I mean,
That's
what was
right.
your
He
thought?
he wasn't a man until he was
You know, at
30.
17. Well, even then.
No, wait.
You know, what was your thought? You know, when I was 17, I was thinking, man, you know, 30 years old.
I remember,
they're
when-
I'll never even live to be that old.
I remember when I was in the 4th grade, we had an 8th grader in the same room, and I was like, wow,
Yeah.
he's up there.
Yeah, he was 12. Yeah.
Well, plus he probably was more accustomed as being the younger one, and just tell him about everything.
Well, little kids do that, don't they?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but he was honest.
He was honest.
And he had a tender heart. And
And he
Yeah.
probably led a very sheltered life. I mean, we can get this from the fact that his father loved him more than anything else, and he made him this long robe, you know, that he wore. So if that's true, then he may not have been around his brothers a whole lot.
Spent
His
more
brothers
time in
lived
the house
wherever they
with his dad.
lived. They didn't live with the father, right? They had wherever they lived. You got a comment? Question? No? Okay. So I think that all these things are factors. Joe? No?
I just see it as stating a fact.
yeah,
He didn't realize that it was hurtful to the other guys.
yeah.
He wasn't trying to hurt him, right?
No, it was
No,
just-
he wasn't.
He
Okay.
was just telling a story.
Okay. He had this dream, and you just sit around the breakfast table and you tell what happened, right? Okay. So he said unto them, Here I pray this dream I have dreamed, for behold, we read that. Okay, so 8. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more. That was what, 3 times now? Hated him yet the more?
3 times.
Verse 9, And he dreamed yet another dream, and he told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. He says 11 stars here. Benjamin's not born yet.
Yeah.
And of course, the sun and the moon are his parents.
But in verse 10,
And he told unto his father and to his brother, and his father rebuked him, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Still shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth? So Jacob doesn't catch the 11, I don't think.
at first.
Or because the 11th hasn't been born,
Right.
or the 12th. So his brother envied him, and but his father observed the saying. His father felt that there was some significance in this.
Well, you got to remember that Jacob had a dream too of a ladder coming down out of heaven.
Yeah, but that was special to him.
Right, but still, I mean, he knew that God gave dreams.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and then maybe, like you said, Benjamin wasn't born yet, but then Abraham thought a few seconds and said, "Hey, wait a minute. There's not. How can 11 bow when they're bowing to one of the 11? You see what I'm saying? So.
Oh,
I
yeah,
started thinking
that
about it,
that doesn't
that's
come out, but the fact that he said there was 11,
Right.
that's a prophecy of another son to come.
Right,
Right.
and that's what I'm saying. And Jacob might have understood. Hey, there's something going on.
Finally.
There's really something going on here,
Yeah,
and that's why he said, "Observe." this
observe
thing."
the saying, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so the brethren all went out to feed the flock at Shechem.
Mhm.
What happened at Shechem?
Hmm?
Was that where Dinah got raped? And
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where they slaughtered.
so they're back in dangerous territory, right? I mean, they slaughtered that whole family,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Israel said unto Israel? What was he called earlier?
Jacob.
Jacob.
So how come he's called Israel here?
Faith comes in.
The only reason he had his name changed was faith, right?
Right.
Has
So-
God already changed him?
Yeah,
Oh yeah. At
yeah,
this point.
that was last week, remember, when he wrestled with the
But at
angel?
the first, in chapter 37, verse 1, it says Jacob dwelt. Here, now it's Israel. So why Moses wrote it like
Well,
that?
we have to pick up on these little things. When you read the scriptures, you pick up on the little changes.
Mhm.
And you say, do what?
That's chapter.
Yeah, the same story here. You know, yeah. So the fact that he now is called Israel instead of Jacob perks your ears up. And you say, why, God, did you switch what you call him? Why here? We know why he had his name changed, but why mention him here as Israel instead of Jacob? So Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said unto me, okay, here I am, I'll go. Now, wait a minute. If the father knows that there's a great deal of animosity between the other 10 and this youngest boy,
Maybe that's where his faith came in.
he's going to send him off to these boys that he knows hate him.
Well, he would have to have faith to send him off.
Faith in who?
God.
That God was going to protect him and bring him back?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
He did.
And eventually. Yeah. And he said, go, I pray thee, and see whether it be well with thy brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, what are you looking for? And he said, I'm looking for my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. Because he got to where they were supposed to be, but they weren't there. And the man said, they've departed thence, and I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. Well, this is a good ways off. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him from afar off, how'd they know that it was him?
Coat of any color.
Had on that coat. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to kill him. And they said unto one another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Behold now, therefore, let us slay him and cast him into some pit. What's the pit?
It's usually a well that's been dug.
A dried well.
Mm-hmm.
It could have water in it, but it was a well that they dug down, and then they'd line it with rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let us throw them in. And these pits were everywhere. I mean, wherever they went to water flocks, they had to dig wells in order to have the water to water the flocks. So they say, we can say that some evil beast has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. So they thought to circumvent what God was going to do. They didn't know the dream came from God. They didn't acknowledge that the dream came from God. But they thought that they could block God's will.
Did they really believe in God if they were going to kill him?
Well, they were raised understanding who God
Did
was.
they believe?
They might have had a head knowledge, but they didn't have a heart knowledge.
Do people believe in God and do the wrong things?
Yeah, but not that much plan ahead to kill somebody.
Do people do things in anger and hatred even though they claim to be God's fearing people?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Every day.
What'd you say, Joe?
Think of David.
Yeah.
Right. David loved the Lord. He took a man's wife and he killed her husband. So it's not impossible. It depends on the moment, the temptation.
Right.
Well, that's the reason why Christ came, to show us how to do it, what to do, when to do it, so we
And that we
can
and that
not
we-
have to do it.
Yeah, and that we do have it in us to do anything.
Okay, you're saying that's why Christ came. So it was not known until Christ came?
Well, no, it was known, but Christ proved to the world that you could live a godly life without sin.
Nobody else did?
Enoch,
Enoch is about the only one I can think of right now.
What about Daniel?
Job,
And,
Job?
Yeah, Daniel's never mentioned to be sinning.
Or the 3 Hebrew boys that are with him?
Yeah.
So we don't have to wait to get to Jesus.
No.
We have to rightly read the scriptures and find the stories that are there. Because from the very beginning, it's for our admonition and our learning.
But all those stories were an example or even a type to Christ. I mean,
What was Samuel saying?
What did what?
Samuel. What was Samuel's sin?
Samuel's sin? You're right, Samuel. We don't have any record against Samuel either.
Oh, wait a minute, didn't his sons,
That's his sons.
but did he teach them correctly?
Yeah, they just went corrupt on their own.
Yeah.
Hey, you're right, Samuel. We don't have any record of Samuel sinning either. So, we have a situation. They concoct this whole story. They're going to kill him and then go back to their father and lie to him. And when Reuben heard it, verse 21, when Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit as in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him back to his father again. So who's Reuben?
The oldest son.
The oldest son. He's the one that's responsible for the family. Right?
And he's stepping in and doing what he's supposed to do as
little
the
bit.
heir and oldest son.
Do what?
He's stepping in a little bit.
Yeah, well, he tried.
He tried.
He tried.
He tried. I mean, that's basically what he was supposed to do as the oldest son and being going to be getting the inheritance, whether it's the monetary inheritance and or the spiritual inheritance. He was trying to do right.
Okay, so why wasn't he a little more bold about this? Why didn't he just stand up and say, no, you ain't hurting this boy?
There's a bunch of them.
Well, it doesn't matter. He's the head of the family. I mean,
And they're supposed, and if they understood the way it goes, they were supposed to respect him.
so you're right.
He had his feelings too against him, I think. Deep down he resented him also.
Well, he may have, because he may have seen him as a rival to the blessing,
To the blessing.
since he was the firstborn of
He
the.
just kind of a little bit tried to step in, but not
Yeah,
boldly, like you say.
yeah, because Reuben is the firstborn of Leah, but Joseph is the firstborn of the woman that his father really loved.
I was gonna say that Reuben was probably afraid that Joseph was gonna steal the birthright from him.
Well, yeah, he could have had that fear.
Yeah.
And in actuality, he did, because he got a double blessing in the end.
Right.
So,
Well, he knew the history of his dad too.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Right.
was there's all the history of this, family story.
this is a totally dysfunctional family.
That's
Yeah.
I mean, if you read the whole story and you pay attention to the characters and the things that they got into, it is a totally dysfunctional family. So yeah, I think Reuben could have done a little more. Reuben could have just stood up and said, no, we're not hurting our brother, and not allowed them to do anything. So he had a plan, though, that he was going to try to rescue him. 23, and it came to pass when Joseph came unto his brethren that they stripped Joseph out of his coat, that hated coat. And verse 24, and they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. Otherwise he could have drowned. Can't tread water forever. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, being spicery, balm, and myrrh, and going to carry it on down to Egypt. Can you imagine? You've thrown your younger brother in a pit, and you sit down and eat,
You eat your lunch.
and you eat your lunch. You hear this kid screaming, what have you done to me? Why, I mean, he didn't just
Please
sit
let
there in the
me
bottom
out.
of that
Please,
hole
please,
doing
please.
nothing.
Yeah.
Do what?
Please let me out. Just please.
Yeah.
Please help me.
He was saying something, help, get me out, whatever. I mean,
Yeah,
and
what are
they,
you guys doing?
something, down at the bottom of that pit. He was not sitting down there quietly waiting for something else to happen. He was yelling for help. And you sit down and you eat your food and you pay no attention. How hard-hearted can somebody be?
So that was intent of them being like that. Not just one or two people.
Well,
10
Reuben
of them.
wasn't with that one.
Except maybe Reuben.
Well, I think it doesn't say.
Well, won't envy and jealous do you that way?
Yeah.
Hate,
Oh, yeah.
envy, jealousy.
I mean, how hard were their hearts?
Hard,
Hard.
very hard.
No less hard than Pharaoh's heart when it came to releasing the Israelites to go to worship God.
So what hardens your heart?
Unbelief, your stubbornness, your selfishness.
Continued sin?
Continued sin, rebellion, yeah.
Yep, it's all
As we harden our heart through continued sin and unbelief, the Holy Spirit finally says, I can't get through this.
He's not gonna let me
You
in.
can sit over at the sideboard, wait and see if you'll change, and then if you don't, then he goes the other way.
Well, only He knows when to give up on us. Unfortunately, that's, I'm glad. Okay, so Judah, now which one is Judah?
He was the fourth, wasn't he?
Third or fourth.
Fourth of
Of Leah.
Leah. Okay. So he said unto his brother, what profit if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? What profit? And what does he call him?
But
Next verse he says, for he is our brother. So he's trying to point out that, this is our brother. Let's be a little bit kind here. Right?
Yeah.
Come, let us just sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let our hand not be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers thought, well, yeah, we'll get a little money out of this. So the Ishmaelites, who are they?
They were,
they're long lost cousins.
From
it's
Ishmael.
children of Edom, weren't they? Or
Children.
no,
Ishmaelites.
those are Edomites.
Ishmaelites.
Okay, Ishmael. Okay, that kind of gives it away, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Ishmael.
kind of.
That's why I said long lost cousins.
Abraham's
Yeah, Abraham's other son's descendants.
first,
Oh, Abraham's
Hagar,
first son. Yeah, they're descendants of him. So they are cousins.
Yeah.
Okay, and they're tradespeople. It says that they're carrying spices down to Egypt. So this is something they do all the time. They go from Arabia down to Egypt.
They knew they were going to buy their cousin and then sell him or something?
Well, yeah, they would.
They don't care. Mercenaries.
They're mercenaries, they don't care. It's no
But they were
different.
cousins also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the Ishmaelites are cousins.
Ishmaelites are cousins of
And the Midianites, in verse 25, it calls them
Midianites.
Ishmaelites, and in verse 28, it calls them Midianites.
It's interchangeable as we go down to the chapter.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they are essentially the same people.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's just Ishmael gives you the designation of where their ancestors from. Midian gives you where they live at.
Oh,
So to
because
speak.
Abraham also had a son named Midian.
Well, from the other
From
way?
Keturah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so then past the Midianites. So some people say that the Ishmaelites went by first and they didn't stop them while they're discussing this. And then here comes some Midianites, and they actually sold to
Well,
the
either way,
Midianites.
it don't matter.
So whatever, we're not sure.
Go in the same place.
All the same place, and they're all cousins. Okay? Just the Midianites go back to Abraham. Well, I guess Ishmael goes back to Abraham too. So they're both cousins. So then they're past the Midianite merchantmen, and they drew up and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites, same people, for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph down to Egypt. Okay, now this path that they took as they were going south,
Normal trade route.
they went right by the encampment of Jacob.
Jacob, yeah.
So Joseph is walking along, tied to a camel, and he sees his father. He knew where his father was. He may not have seen him particularly standing there, but he knew the area where his father was camped,
Mm-hmm.
and he's on his way past. And he can't stop. He can't yell loud enough. Do you think his heart was broken?
He was probably terrified because he was sure that he wasn't going to have a good ending.
But was his heart broken because of what was going to happen to his father?
He loved the
Oh,
kid,
yeah, because he knew it would break his father's heart.
He heard what was being said about, his brothers were saying, we'll go back and we'll tell the story.
And he knew it'd break his dad's heart.
He knew it was going to break his dad's heart. He was a tender-hearted child.
Mm-hmm.
He loved his father and his mother. He knew he'd never see his mother again. Or he didn't think he'd ever see his father again either. Okay.
17.
Do what?
At 17.
At 17, he suffers this. Yeah, at 17, he suffers this. Okay. So, and Reuben returned to the pit. So where Reuben went, I don't know. After the meal, maybe he didn't eat with whatever. He went off. So he was not part of this sale deal.
Right.
So he returned into the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. He was truly upset that his brother was gone.
Well, I think maybe Reuben had a closer relationship to Israel than we realize, even though he was Leah's firstborn. They might have had a closer relationship than it's really mentioned here, and that's why he knew how this would hurt his father.
A closer relationship until he took his father's concubine.
Yeah, true.
How much respect did he have for his father when he did that?
Yeah.
Well, he may have begun to recognize his responsibilities. He was the head of the household as the oldest son, and because the next verse there, what am I going to do? Whither shall I go?
Yeah, I mean, for him to tear his clothes,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
he was truly grief-filled.
When I go home and tell Daddy about this, and my responsibility, I've shirked my responsibilities, and where am I going to go? I'll be cast out myself.
Well, he had to decide how he was going to handle this, because was he going to tell the truth, or was he going to lie to his father like all the other brothers?
Yeah.
And he ends up lying.
And he ends up lying.
Mm-hmm.
So they took Joseph's coat,
A lesson for us, not to compromise. Keep
or
it
go
there.
along with the crowd.
Or go along with the crowd.
Well, that goes back to the prophet up there in 26. What profit is it if we slay our brother? They weren't just thinking about the dollars. It was, what can we gain by this? Our brother says we're going to do thus and such, and we're not. If we kill him, what's that going to get us? And it wasn't so much, let's sell him to the Midianite and get 30 pieces of silver or whatever it was. That wasn't the point.
20, he didn't go quite as much as
20,
Christ.
yeah, that wasn't really the point. It happened, but it wasn't really the point. It was, what are we going to gain out of this? What good is it going to do us when we get home and tell Daddy about this?
Well, I think that part of what they thought they were going to gain was getting this little gnat out of their face.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it was worth that freedom from being him always in their face and being watching him be accepted by Dad more than they were accepted. And I mean, there was more to it than just we're going to sell our brother and get 20 pieces of silver, like you said.
Well, I don't know about them, but I know in the past when I've done something not necessarily exactly like this, but similar, and you've got to keep lying to cover it up, and keep lying and keep lying. It grates on your psyche. It grates on your systems. You just
It never lets go.
it never lets go. And they at the moment in time they thought this was the best thing to do. But as we read through the story, down through the story, we're going to find out they weren't relieved of this
They weren't
whole thing
relieved until they faced Joseph
until
in
they
Egypt.
faced Joseph again. That's right. And that's the way I look at it. Like I put myself in the same place with things that in the past that have happened to me, and I say, man, I should have never made that decision. I should have gone this other way. So to read the story about what happens to Joseph, I think maybe all of us can say at some time or another, maybe we've been there, done the same thing that these brothers have done.
Yeah, it's more personal. Yeah.
It's more personal,
How did you say the Ishmaelites and the Midianites are cousins? I mean, how were they related?
Well, Ishmael was the first son that Abraham had with, God promised Abraham a son. He didn't have a son for 25 years. So his wife says, take my slave girl here and have a son. So that's Ishmael. It's confusing. I've never found a commentary that straightened it out as to whether they were exactly the same people or two different kind of people. But because it speaks back and forth, like Mary said, back and forth, it calls them Ishmaelites one verse, Midianites next verse, and Ishmaelites next verse, and Midianites next verse. So
Who did you say had a son named
he did.
Midian?
Yeah, when Sarah died, he took another wife named Keturah, and he had 6 more sons by Keturah. One of them was named Midian.
But that was after Joseph was
Oh,
That was Abraham we're talking
gone.
about.
Oh, Abraham. Yeah, okay. I don't know what I'm thinking.
Yeah, Joseph hadn't been born yet.
Wrong one.
Yeah. Okay, so Abraham had 2 wives. Sarah died, and he took Keturah and had 6 sons by her, and one of them was named Midian.
So they were related by Abraham.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it
That's
Well,
why I
I
said,
just
that's
want-
why I said long lost cousin.
Well, when you say that, and they're interchangeable here, I just wonder if Midian and the other boy's name,
Ishmael.
Ishmael, if they kind of got together, you know, and traveled together, worked together, farmed together, shoot,
'Cause they all did the
tended
same
their sheep
thing.
together, they all did the same thing,
I
and
mean,
they may
they
have
were
been all pretty much in the same household. So
Yeah.
when you looked at one, you go, well, they're Ishmaelites. Well, no, they're Midianites. If it's not, you know, something like an interchangeable thing, because they were all together, it was family.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they all did the same kind of trading,
Yeah,
the same lifestyle.
yeah.
Merchants and stuff.
Yeah.
Shepherds.
Yeah. So anyway, I've never found anything that distinguished as to why one place are called Ishmaelites and the next place are called Midianites. And they are all descendants of Abraham, which puts them, does that make them cousins or uncles or what?
Second cousins.
I mean, you know, if it's your grandfather's son, it's your grandfather's son, does that make them a cousin? I can never keep that stuff straight.
Second
I
cousin.
have a family,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
Your descendants here of Abraham in chapter 25, verse 1 gives you all the
Yeah, there's all the
list of
names.
different names of the second wife.
Say that again?
Chapter 25 of Genesis gives you, verse 1, gives you the descendants of the second wife with Abraham.
Yeah.
And right in the middle was Midian. He wasn't the firstborn, but he was in
Yeah.
the middle of it.
So
Well,
anyway.
Midian and Midian, both.
So anyway, they are related.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So whether or not they recognize that, I don't know. It doesn't say, but I don't know if they said we're Jacob's sons, you know, we're your cousins. I don't know if they said that. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe not. But whatever, they were glad to get a young boy, strong, good looking. They knew they could get some dollars out of him.
Give him 20, whatever it was,
Shekels.
pieces of silver to the brothers was nothing compared to what they were going to get down
Probably.
in Egypt.
Probably.
Yeah.
So anyway, and they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, "We have found this. Oh, look, isn't this really your son's coat?" Well, first they were calling him his brother. Now it's your son.
That's right.
Is it really? They show it to him. Is it really? Could this be? They know it is. There's probably there's not another coat on earth that would look like that. So they come in innocently. Oh, look what we found. And Jacob knew it and said, "It is my son's coat. An evil beast has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces." So they didn't really have to lie, did they? They let their father make up the story.
Right.
And
All
they just-
all they did was ask the question, is this his cup?
Yeah.
Just
So
like,
they-
like we can do today to bring people on and motivate them to do stuff. You just have to ask a question.
Well,
Fill out the
they knew
survey.
what the response would be, so they didn't actually lie, but they did put the wrong idea into their father's
Well, they
house.
lied by omission.
So they were overzealous with adding to the story to make sure that he got the idea.
So it breaks his heart. Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days.
And the Lord changed his name back again.
And all his sons and all his daughters rose up. All his daughters, there's more than Dinah.
Mm-hmm.
Dinah's the only one who gets a name,
Mm-hmm.
but there's more than Dinah. They rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and he said, "For I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him, and the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. So this poor old man, Jacob, and as we talked last week, you weren't here last week, but as we talked last week, Isaac is still alive. He doesn't get named anymore. But if he was 180 years old when he died, he had to have been still alive here. So it hurt his heart, too. And Rachel, it doesn't mention Rachel's response.
You gotta, some people will question that about the Bible, because, like you just mentioned daughters, and they're never mentioned who they were in the Bible, except for one was Dana, or Dinah, whatever it was. This is written on a patriarchal system, and it's all the lineage of Christ. So, there are women involved, we just don't hear about them or read
The only
about them
women
in
that
the
get
background.
mentioned are the ones that have something extraordinary happen to them.
Right. Right.
And it's the same with the sons.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, yeah, it was a patriarchal system, but if you didn't do something extraordinary, you didn't get your name in the book.
Mm-hmm.
There were lots and lots of other people besides the ones we read about here.
Mm-hmm.
What, Dorothy?
Well, the close discernment to know the Bible is where you know where these other people are here.
Yeah.
That's,
Like me telling a story about the Ice Age.
yeah.
You know, it happened. It's not in the Bible.
No, but
I had somebody question me and said, "Where's that in Ellen White?" I said, I don't know. I'm going to put Ellen White.
you might not have mentioned it.
She didn't. After that, I looked it up. She didn't mention it a single time. And I went to the pioneers' writings that we've got on computer, looked it up. There was only one person that mentioned it, and he mentioned it twice. And he mentioned it in the context of fighting against scientists who were studying, they were secular scientists studying the Ice Age, and they were trying to prove that it disavowed the Bible's truth of, because they said the Ice Age was, 40,000 years ago, and that would disprove the age of the Bible. It's only 6,000 years. So
So who said that?
Wagner,
Wagner mentioned?
yeah.
About that? Yeah,
So that, I mean, in all the writing, we've got a CD-ROM that has all the writings of Ellen White and all the writings of the pioneers. So everything that was written is on this CD. So you can type in what you want to look, just like you're doing a Bible search, and if that string of words has been written about, it'll pop it up. You can find it. Sometimes you'll get a whole lot of hits on it, but sometimes you don't get any.
Mm-hmm.
So there was only 2 hits about the Ice Age. Wagner was the one that wrote it, and it was 2 different letters that he wrote, or articles that he wrote, and he was combating secular scientists that were saying that the Ice Age disproved the truth of the Bible. Disproved the truth of the Bible. And Wagner's argument was, no, it doesn't. But Wagner didn't have the science that we have today, like I presented in that study on Wednesday night, because we know more now. I mean, we have better science now than they had 150 years ago, So,
Well, even was it was Jones that went before the Senate.
do what?
Wasn't it Jones that went before the Senate
Yeah.
about the Sabbath? and
Yeah,
Sunday worship?
yeah.
So those guys in cohort with each other, working against secular society, proving the Bible.
Okay, we'll let Leslie get started. We won't go any farther. We finish this chapter. And next week, we'll pick up the rest of the story of Joseph. So there's not a whole lot in the quarterly on the next few chapters anyway,
Right.
but we'll go from here about Joseph to the rest of the story about Joseph. So, that's what
I think, if nobody's ever really read that story, and especially from Genesis 36 to 41, 42, it's an awesome story, and it gives us a lot of lessons about our own lives and how this one young man stayed faithful to God.
That's right.
All by himself, nobody around him to he had no patriarchs and prophets or mentors or
He had his
or
father.
the Bible. No, his father was there later, but I'm talking about all during his times of trouble that he had.
His father had taught him 17 years.
That's
Right.
right.
Taught him who God was, taught him what faith was, taught him why his name was changed from Jacob to Israel. His father had very carefully taught him.
And you also got to remember, like you just got through mentioning, his grandfather was still alive, his grandmother was still alive, and they could tell the stories.
What about his
His
mother?
grandmother was
His
dead.
mother
Mother,
alive?
or his mother, yeah.
His mother was alive.
Yeah.
So, he was raised in a godly household,
Mm-hmm.
but so were the other brothers. They just didn't learn the lesson. Joseph had a soft heart. He learned the lesson.
But doesn't that prove true to us today? You could have a whole family of 10 kids, mom and dad bring them up in the church and teach them, have Bible studies every day with them and, worship with them, and maybe 2 or 3 of the kids follow through, the rest of them go off on their own. I mean, this is the story of the remnant, basically.
We all have free will.
That's right.
And we all have an equal measure of faith given to us. The measure of faith has been given to all of us. And you can use it or You can not
throw
use
it
it.
away.
You can cultivate it, make right decisions, or you can make wrong decisions.
Mhm.
Some of us sit there and go,
Well, as we go through life, we all make right decisions and wrong decisions, yeah.
But at some point in our lives, we're gonna have to make that critical decision. Are we gonna move to the right way or the left way? Are we gonna be with the goats or are we gonna be with the sheep?
You do better hurry up, you never know.
That's right. Today is the day of salvation.
Right. Joe, you got anything else? More comments? Questions? No? Dorothy? No?
I just love the clarification as my mind tries to, you know.
Well, I know, but did we raise any questions that you didn't get answered?
I just need to go back and read what he said about the, chapter.
Oh, chapter
36,
25,
40.
yeah, mhm.
too.
Chapter what?
25.
25, that's where chapter, Linda, chapter 25 is where Abraham takes another wife, and it lists his 6 sons there. That's what chapter 25 is about. Eva, questions? Comments?
Oh,
No?
no. Thank you, though.
Oh, hi, I missed that.
No? No?